The termination letter hit my desk at 8:14 a.m. on a Tuesday, still warm from the printer. I know the exact time because I had been watching the clock since 6:47, which was when my head had dropped against my keyboard for the last time, and I'd stopped fighting it. 48 hours and 11 minutes without sleep. I had the server logs to prove it, not that anyone had asked. The letter was 4 sentences. The last one read, "Effective immediately." My name at the top was spelled correctly, which felt like the cruelest detail. Nora Vizquez. Every letter in its place, and still out the door. I didn't cry. I couldn't. Crying requires a reserve of something I had spent entirely in a damp sub-basement 2 floors below, sitting under a rack of humming servers, watching intrusion packets arrive like a tide I'd had to hold back with my bare hands and whatever code I could rewrite fast enough. 48 hours. 3 attack vectors. 1 compromised credential that turned out to belong to our CFO's assistant, who had clicked a phishing link on a personal laptop and never told anyone. I'd found it at hour 14. I'd closed it at hour 19. The remaining 29 hours were cleanup, verification, and the particular purgatory of building a fortress wall while someone kept testing the hinges. I had saved the company. I want to be clear about that, not because I'm proud in any way that sounds like bragging, but because it matters to what came next. The data intact. The client contracts intact. The acquisition talks that had been scheduled for Thursday intact, all of it, because I had not slept and had not left and had not told anyone, because the only person I'd tried to call was my supervisor Marcus, and Marcus had sent my call to voicemail at midnight, and again at 3, and again at 7, and the junior tech I'd roped in to help had gone home at hour 22, because he had a dentist appointment. The letter was signed by someone in HR whose name I didn't recognize. I folded it in thirds, put it in my bag, and went to find my things. My desk was in the corner of the open plan floor, by the window that looked out over the financial district. I had a succulent named Gerald, a photograph of my sister B at her nursing school graduation, and a mug that said "World's Okayest Everything." I put them in a box. Gerald's pot had left a ring on the laminate. I looked at the ring for a moment. 17 months of Gerald, and that ring was all that would remain. I was at the elevator with my box when I heard my name. "Not my name, actually," she said. "The one who was sleeping." I turned around. Ria Solis stood in the middle of the floor in a charcoal suit that fit her the way architecture fits a skyline, like it was load-bearing, like the building needed it. I knew who she was. Everyone knew who she was. The CEO. The woman who had taken a regional cybersecurity firm 9 years ago and turned it into the firm. The one whose name appeared in Senate testimony and in financial columns, and once, memorably, on the cover of a magazine under the headline, "The Woman Who Knows Where Your Secrets Are." They called her the Iron Circuit in the trade press, which was half admiring and half terrified and probably accurate on both counts. Her scent reached me across the 12 feet between us before her words did. Something cool and mineral, like petrichor on slate, like rain on a stone bridge the morning after a hard night. She was looking at me the way someone looks at a door they haven't decided whether to open. "That was me," I said. "You were asleep at your workstation at 8 this morning. I was unconscious at my workstation at 8 this morning. There's a small but meaningful difference." Her assistant, a compact woman with a tablet and the expression of someone who has learned to be very still near a live wire, made a small movement. Ria Solis did not move at all. "The letter stands," she said, "until I understand why one of my employees thought sleeping in the office was acceptable." There was a speech I could have made, I had the shape of it somewhere in my exhausted mind, all the hours and all the proof and all the specific facts marshaled in a row. But I looked at her looking at me, and I thought about Marcus's voicemail, and Marcus's voicemail, and Marcus's voicemail, and something in me that had been wound tight for 48 hours simply stopped. The server logs are in the incident folder under my access credentials, I said. If someone reads them, they'll understand. If no one reads them, it doesn't matter. I pushed the elevator call button with my elbow because my hands were full of the box with Gerald and Bee's photograph and the mug. The doors opened. I stepped in. I watched her face in the narrowing gap as the doors closed, and she was still standing exactly as she had been, but something had shifted in her expression. A line between her brows, a slight adjustment of stillness into something that was not quite the same thing. The doors sealed. The elevator dropped, 32 floors to the lobby, and I spent every one of them telling myself it was fine. It was not fine. My name was Nora Vasquez. I was 29 years old, a presented omega in a field full of alphas and betas who had never once let me forget either of those facts. I had a master's degree in network security that I'd paid for myself while working night shifts, a student loan that still had 4 years on it, and a sister whose hospital contract stipulated she couldn't take outside income for another 8 months. The rent for our apartment was $2,340 a month. I had $6,800 in savings and a box with a succulent in it and a mug. The lobby smelled like cold marble and someone's expensive coffee. Outside, the city was doing what it always did, continuing without me. I sat on a bench in the small plaza in front of the building and put the box down and looked at Gerald and Gerald's cracked terracotta pot and thought, I'm going to find the light in this. I just need a minute. I had been saying that to myself for 3 years, which is how long it had been since my last real sleep, or what felt like it, which is how long I had been working at Solaris Data Systems and being paid 2 tiers below market rate and being called Vasquez with a Z by Marcus when he remembered I existed at all. I said it to myself the way you say things that have stopped meaning anything and started being just the shape your mouth makes when you're holding yourself together. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. A text. Don't go far. Someone needs to read those logs, and the only person they let in this building who might understand them is currently on a plaza bench with a cactus. I stared at the message for 8 seconds. I counted all of them. Then I looked up at the building's glass face, 32 floors of it reflecting the gray morning sky, and somewhere near the top a light was on. I picked up Gerald. I waited. 3 minutes later, the same unknown number called. I answered. It was the assistant, Petra, she said her name was, which I cataloged as cautious and capable from the single syllable, who told me in a professional tone that Miss Solis would like to speak with me if I was available. The phrasing was formal and slightly absurd given that I was sitting on a public bench having been fired 40 minutes ago, and I almost said so. Instead I said, the server logs. Yes, Petra said. She read them. I picked up my box. I went back inside. The 41st floor was not a floor I had ever been to before. The elevator opened directly into a reception area that had the specific quality of silence that costs more than noise, the kind bought by good insulation and expensive glass, and the understanding that people here did not raise their voices. A single desk, pale wood and clean lines, a view of the city that made the version from my desk look like a postcard reproduction. Petra met me at the elevator and took the box without being asked, which was either courtesy or a calculation that I would be easier to manage without my hands full. Possibly both. She led me to a corner office where Ria Solis was standing at her window with a coffee cup she wasn't drinking from, looking at the same city I'd been looking at 32 floors below, which seemed like either a coincidence or something else. "Sit," Rhea said, without turning around. I sat. She turned eventually. The morning light made her face harder to read, not easier. She was, I noticed, the way you notice a structural load-bearing wall, not looking at me the way she had in the lobby. The line between her brows was still there. The stillness was the same. But her scent had shifted. The petrichor and slate had something warmer underneath now, or I was imagining it through exhaustion. 48 hours, she said. And 11 minutes. 48 hours and 11 minutes during which you identified a compromised credential belonging to the CFO's assistant's personal laptop, isolated 3 attack vectors, closed the primary exploit at hour 19, spent the following 29 hours on verification and remediation, and single-handedly preserved the data integrity that our Thursday acquisition meeting depends on. Yes, without telling anyone. I tried to tell Marcus. Her jaw moved. One small tightening. Marcus, your supervisor, who sent your calls to voicemail. 3 times. The coffee cup made a small sound against her desk when she set it down. Not a slam, just deliberate. The kind of sound a careful person makes when they want to break something and has decided not to. The termination letter was issued on Marcus's recommendation, she said. He marked you for a performance review 2 weeks ago. The reason cited was insubordination. I had not known that. The word landed somewhere in my chest with the specific impact of something that should have surprised me and didn't. The incident folder, she said, contains 412 log entries with your access signature and timestamps beginning at 8:03 a.m. Saturday. The signature coverage is complete. There are no gaps in the security perimeter. Our Thursday meeting will proceed as scheduled. A pause. That was not going to be the case before you started. I know. What were you going to do? She was looking at me in a way I didn't have a category for. With your box and your cactus. What was the next step? Find a job that doesn't need 48 hours of me and then fire me for it. Something happened at the corner of her mouth. Not a smile. A near miss of one. The letter is rescinded, she said. Marcus is on administrative leave pending a full review. You will take 3 days of paid recovery leave beginning today. When you return, your classification will be reviewed. She looked at the box Petra had set on the edge of her desk, at Gerald's terracotta pot, at the mug. World's okayest everything, she said. A gift from my sister. She has good instincts. I didn't know what to say to that, so I said nothing, which turned out to be the right answer. Rhea Solis looked at the window again and said, I'll have Petra arrange a car. I can take the subway. You've been awake for 49 hours. 49 and change. Car, she said. It was one word, and it was not a request, and it was also, and this is the part I kept turning over later, on the car ride home, in the specific warmth of a leather back seat while Gerald sat on the middle console, because I couldn't let go of him yet, not unkind. I slept for 14 hours. I slept without the particular animal wariness that had been sitting behind my sternum for so long, I'd forgotten it wasn't supposed to be there. I slept the way you sleep when something has been set down that you've been carrying since before you knew you were carrying it. B texted me at noon. The cactus and the mug are on the kitchen table. Were you crying? The pot is on a dish towel. I hadn't been crying. I had just not wanted Gerald to leak on the floor. 3 days later, I went back. The building looked the same. The lobby smelled the same. The elevator was the same, except that when I pressed 7 for my floor, nothing happened for a moment, and then Petra's voice came through the panel. 32, please, when you have a moment. I thought, when you have a moment is doing a great deal of work there. I pressed 32 and went up. Marcus was gone. His desk had been cleared in the clean, particular way that means someone else did the clearing. I learned later, from my cubicle neighbor Deshi, that he had been walked out the previous Wednesday with a security escort and his personal effects in a box that was not given time to include the coffee maker he had brought from home. I did not feel triumphant about this. I felt a kind of flat, tired justice, the bookkeeping settling. Petra brought me to the 32nd floor and left me in a conference room with a view and a laptop and a briefing document 47 pages long, and I spent the next 2 hours learning that my classification review had resulted in my being moved to a newly created role called Director of Network Integrity, which came with a salary that made me read the number 3 times because I thought I was misplacing a digit. I was not misplacing a digit. Ria Solis came into the conference room at 11, carrying 2 coffees. She set one in front of me without asking how I took it, which should have been presumptuous and wasn't, because it turned out she had found the particular notes in my cup from the break room machine, the one I used every morning, milk and no sugar, which was either coincidence or something a CEO had no reason to notice. She sat across from me and looked at the document and said, "Questions. The reporting structure. You report to me directly. That's unusual for a director-level position in a firm this size." "Yes, the scope," I said. "The brief covers 3 regional offices and the parent company servers. That's 4 concurrent infrastructure environments, which you managed simultaneously under duress during a live attack," she said. "So I don't expect the infrastructure to be the challenge." She looked at me across the table. "The challenge will be the people who already hold territory in those environments and won't be glad to have someone new looking at their architecture. People like Marcus. People like what Marcus was a symptom of." Yes, her scent in this room, in the morning light coming through the tinted glass, was cleaner than it had been in the lobby, less guarded. The petrichor and slate were there, the cool mineral edge, but underneath was something like wood smoke, low, steady, like a fire that's been burning long enough to know its own shape. I noticed that. I accepted the role. I drank the coffee. She didn't stay long, and when she left, she paused at the door and said, without turning, the 48 hours. "Is that normal for you?" I thought about the honest answer. "I stop when the breach is closed," I said. "A beat." That's not what I asked. She left before I could work out what she had asked instead. The first 2 weeks in the new role were a particular kind of warfare that doesn't require weapons, the kind where everyone in a room already knows who has the power and is deciding whether to make the newcomer prove it or simply watch to see if she'll flinch. I didn't flinch. I had been doing this for 3 years in a building where people knew my name wrong and still expected results. I knew how to work in a room that was waiting for me to fail. The regional leads were 3 men and a woman named Cassandra, who was the only one who looked at me during the initial call with something other than performative patience. Cassandra ran the Boston office and had 17 years in the field and had apparently been passed over for this exact role twice. I called her separately the day after the group meeting and asked what she'd have done differently with the Thursday infrastructure in the attack scenario. She told me in precise technical terms for 20 minutes without a single pause to check if I was following. I was following perfectly, and I told her so. After that, she was mine. Not politically. She had been in the field too long to give loyalty away cheaply, but professionally, which is better. She started sending me the things she hadn't been able to flag upward. There were a lot of them. I also met Ria Solis's head of security, a man named Tomas who looked like the kind of person who maps exits when he enters a room and had been doing it so long he'd stopped knowing he was doing it. He introduced himself at the coffee station on the 32nd floor one morning and said, "She told me to ask if you need anything." I said, "Who did?" He said, "You know who." His tone was dry and flat and contained a lifetime of loyalty in it, and I filed him under, asset, careful, possibly soft underneath. I was right about that last part, but that came later. The third week, there was a social event, the kind with champagne and 2 white teeth and architects of opinion air kissing each other near the canapes. Ria brought me into it without explaining why. Petra simply added it to my calendar with the note, "Attendance expected, 6 p.m., Ria's +1. I stared at that note for a while. Then I borrowed a dress from B, who was 2 inches taller and 3 sizes more glamorous, and said, "Are you going on a date or a mission?" I said, "I don't know yet." She said that was the most interesting thing I'd said in months. The dress was green. Emerald, actually. B said it looked like I was in charge of something, and she wasn't wrong, which was its own kind of revelation. Ria met me at the venue entrance with the particular economy of someone who has decided not to react to something and is containing the decision behind her sternum. She said, "You look like you made a choice tonight." I said, "The dress was my sister's choice." She said, "The way you're wearing it is yours." Her scent had the wood smoke in it again, and something I hadn't cataloged before, faintly sweet under the mineral cool, like cedar on warm stone in late afternoon. I thought, that's dangerous information. The venue was the kind of room that announces wealth through texture, limestone floors and pendant lights and table settings that had been arranged by someone who thought that individual consideration was a form of architecture. The people in it were the kind who've been powerful long enough to mistake it for personality. Ria moved through them with the ease of someone navigating familiar terrain she has learned not to trust. I stayed close and watched the room, and she introduced me as her Director of Network Integrity and said my name correctly, which should not have been notable, and was. There was a woman named Sylvie Grange. I clocked her in the first 4 minutes. Early 40s, precise posture, the specific warmth of someone who has calculated the cost of every degree of it. Dark hair pinned at an angle that suggested decision-making. Silk that was silk and not pretending to be. She moved toward Ria with the ease of someone who has done it before and expects to keep doing it, and she put a hand briefly on Ria's arm and said something low that I was not meant to hear. And Ria's scent went flat and cold in under a second. Not angry. Not exactly. The way a room goes cold when a window opens on a winter night. Sylvie looked at me for the first time. Her smile was complete. "And you're the new project," she said. "I'm the Director of Network Integrity," I said. "Of course you are. Everything in it warm and nothing in it kind," Ria said, neutrally. Nora found the attack vector in the August incident. Sylvie's gaze moved between us and came to a conclusion I hadn't given her permission to reach. How resourceful. Later, in the car, I asked, "Old business?" Ria said, "Old expectation." I said, she thought she was the project. A pause of maybe 4 seconds. She thought she was the foregone conclusion, Ria said. She was incorrect. Her voice was the same as it always was, level, quiet, carrying its own weight without help. But her scent had come back, the wood smoke and the petrichor, warmer than it had been in the venue. I looked out the window and said nothing and felt the warmth of it like a frequency I had no business receiving. B, when I got home, was still awake. She looked at the dress and looked at my face and said, "Mission." "Both," I admitted. She made tea and sat across from me at the kitchen table and waited, because she had been doing that since we were children and knew that I sorted things slowly when they mattered. "She's an alpha," I said. B said, "Obviously. I mean the kind that has a press epithet, also obviously. Nora, she sent a car for you when she'd known you for 40 minutes. That was practical. The coffee was not practical, B said. The coffee was looking at you. I looked at Gerald on the windowsill. Gerald, who had been at 2 jobs now and was still alive despite everything, which felt like a metaphor I wasn't ready to examine. She hasn't done anything, I said. No, B said. But she's going to. The 4th week, someone sent a file, not to me, to a board member named Harlan Orr, who forwarded it to 2 others before Tomas intercepted it. The file was a dossier, assembled carefully, attributing the August incident to my negligence and suggesting that my hiring had been an emotional decision on Ria's part, following what the document called an inappropriate dependency formed under stress. It had screenshots of server logs that had been cropped to remove context. It had Marcus's original performance review with the insubordination citation intact. It had a photograph of me and Ria at the venue, heads angled toward each other, which in the right framing looked like something it wasn't. Tomas brought it to me at 7 a.m. He set a printed copy on my desk. He said, "She doesn't know yet. I thought you should see it first." I read it twice. I said, "Sylvie Grange." He said, "The document was routed through a third-party firm she has used before. We can't prove it yet. Give me the unredacted server logs," I said, "the full incident file, the credential analysis, the timestamps, the remediation record, everything with my signature." He gave me a look that had something approving in it. And then I need Cassandra on a call. By noon, we had a documentation package that was not a dossier because it had no agenda. It was 412 log entries and the complete forensic trace of every move made in those 48 hours, cross-referenced against Sylvie Grange's firm's client list, which Cassandra had found in a publicly available procurement record and which included a data broker with ties to 2 of Solaris's competitors, not a smoking gun, better, a pattern, the kind that holds up. At 1:15, I went to the 32nd floor. Ria was on a call. Petra looked at my face and ended the call. I put the package on Ria's desk. I said, "Sylvie Grange sent a document to Harlan Orr this morning. This is why she did it, and this is why it's wrong." I sat down. I waited. She read it the way she read everything. Completely, linearly, without skipping. It took 22 minutes. I watched her face move through something and come out the other side controlled and very still. "She accessed our procurement data," Ria said. "She had someone who did. The access was legitimate, which is what took this long to find." Ria set the last page down. Her scent was a single flat note, cold stone, no warmth, the petrichor scraped down to its geological core. I had not smelled her angry before. It was quieter than I expected, and that was worse. "I would like," she said slowly, "to make a call." "You can," I said, "but if you make it now, we lose the pattern, and she loses one business relationship. If you wait 48 hours and let me finish building the chain, she loses the license." The word 48 hung in the room between us. Her eyes met mine, and something shifted in them, not the anger that stayed, but alongside it, something that read like recognition, which was what I had been told my whole life I didn't deserve. 48 hours, she said. "I'll stay on site," I said. This time, at the end of the 48 hours, someone else brought me coffee. She brought it at 4 a.m. On the second night, when the 32nd floor was empty and I was working at the conference table with 3 screens open and a second wind that tasted like spite. She set the mug down, not my mug, a plain white one, milk and no sugar, which she had somehow gotten right again without asking, and she sat across from me and looked at the screens. "Talk me through it," she said. So I did. For 40 minutes, I walked her through the chain, the access records, the data broker relationship, the timing of Sylvie's introduction of a particular software vendor to 3 of Solaris's client meetings. The way the August attack had been constructed to look like an inside job, which it nearly was, just not the inside I'd been set up to represent. Rhea listened the way she did everything. Completely, she asked 4 questions, all of them precise, all of them hitting the load-bearing parts of the argument. At the end, she said, "You built all of this. Cassandra helped. Cassandra helped because you called her. You built this." I looked at the screens. I said, "I don't like injustice. It makes me difficult to stop." The corner of her mouth again, the near miss. "I have noticed," she said, "that you are difficult to stop." There was a silence that had a different quality than the previous silences between us. Something held in it, or something released into it. She was looking at me across the conference table with the city lights behind her, and her scent was warmer than I had ever tracked it. The wood smoke high and the slate underneath, and something else I hadn't named yet, like sunlight on stone, like the particular warmth a surface holds after the sun has moved. "Nora," she said. It was the first time she had used my name without a context around it. "Yes," I said, "I would like to tell you something." A pause. 2 seconds, measured. I have been running this company for 9 years. In 9 years, I have had 2 people I could not replace. One was Tomas, who has been with me since the beginning. The other is now. She looked at me steadily. I want to be clear that I am not speaking professionally. My heart was doing something complicated. "You've known me for 5 weeks, I said. "I am aware of the timeline. You fired me for 20 minutes, she said, based on incomplete information, which I corrected as soon as I had the complete information. That is not a defense, it is a data point about how I operate." She was watching my face. "I notice things. I notice when someone is carrying more than their share and won't say so. I notice coffee orders. I notice when someone says, 'I'll find the light on a plaza bench with a cactus,' and means it." A breath. "I notice you." I had been told in various ways and by various people over 29 years that I was easy to overlook. I had built a working assumption around it, the way you build around a structural problem, accepting the compromise, routing around the damage. The assumption had a weight I had stopped feeling because it had been there so long. It fell off somewhere between the word notice and the silence after it. "I don't know what to do with that," I said. "You don't have to do anything with it," she said. "I'm not asking for anything. I wanted you to know." She stood. She picked up her own coffee cup. "Finish the chain. Get some sleep when it's done. I'll be here in the morning." She was. 2 days later, in a boardroom on the 41st floor with Harlan Orr and the other 2 board members and the firm's general counsel and Sylvie Grange, I presented the complete chain. 87 pages. Every link documented. Every timestamp verified. The data broker relationship displayed in a chart that a non-specialist could follow, projected on a screen that Sylvie had to look at from 6 feet away. Sylvie's attorney made 2 objections. I answered both with page numbers. Sylvie herself said nothing after the first 15 minutes. She sat with her hands folded on the table and her silk the right shade of composed, and her face doing the work of a performance that didn't have an audience anymore, because everyone in the room had looked at page 44 and understood what they were looking at. The general counsel spoke to the board privately for 11 minutes. When they came back, Harlan Orr, who had forwarded the original dossier to 2 people and whose discomfort had been visible since the moment I'd walked in, said, "The board would like to address several matters with Miss Grange separately." Sylvie looked at Rhea. Rhea looked at Sylvie. Ria said, the regulatory filing goes to the SA by end of business Friday. That's not discretionary. Sylvie's composure was very good. It almost held. She left without looking at me. I think that was its own admission. In the hallway afterward, Tomas fell into step beside me and said, in his particular dry, flat tone, in 15 years. I have never once seen her bring someone coffee at 4 a.m. A pause, just so you have the data. I had the data. I sat with it for another week, which sounds calculated and wasn't. It was the time I needed to be sure that what I felt was mine, and not just the residue of being seen for the first time in so long that I'd lost the ability to trust my own readings. I called B. I walked Gerald to the window and back. I went through the specific forensics of the previous month with the same methodology I used for network vulnerabilities. Where are the false positives? Where are the actual signals? What's the pattern underneath the noise? The pattern was not complicated. She had noticed the coffee order the first week. She had read 412 log entries in full before she called me back inside. She had attended to the detail of my dress and my sister's instincts. She had brought me coffee at 4 a.m, and she had said, I notice you. Not, you're impressive, or you're useful, or any of the forms of valuation I had learned to receive as substitutes for the thing itself. She had said, I notice you. On a Wednesday evening, I knocked on the door of her office at 7 when the floor was quiet. She looked up from a document. She waited. I said, the thing you told me in the conference room. Yes, I've been processing it, I assumed. I wanted you to know that I notice things too. I stopped. I tried again. I noticed that you got the coffee right without asking. I noticed that you read 400 log entries before you called me back. I noticed that you used my name in a board meeting where you could have said my title, and you used my name. I paused. I noticed that your scent changes when you're near me. Or, it changes around me specifically. I don't know if you're aware of that. Her expression was the controlled kind, the one that meant the control was working hard. I'm aware, she said. I'm an omega, I said, and I know what that means, and I know what designations do to situations like this one, and I want to be clear that I'm not, that this isn't. I stopped. I took a breath. I'm telling you that I want to stay. Not the job. I mean, the job too. But not only. She stood up. She came around the desk. She stopped 2 feet from me and looked at me with the full force of the attention I had been operating in the peripheral range of for 6 weeks, and up close it was a specific thing. Warm and absolute and slightly terrifying, like standing in a searchlight and finding out you don't mind. Tell me to leave, she said quietly. And I will. Don't leave, I said. She closed the distance with the particular economy of someone who has been very careful for a very long time and has decided to stop. Her hands, when they found my face, were deliberate. The kiss was not tentative. She was not a tentative person. But it was careful, the kind of careful that means something is being handled with attention to its value. Her scent was everywhere. The petrichor and slate and the wood smoke, and now, close and certain, the sunlight on stone. Mine rose to meet it, warm and sweet, the orange blossom and clean cotton I had been suppressing for weeks without quite letting myself know why. She pulled back just enough to look at me. Nora, she said. Yes, I said. I have been waiting, she said, since the elevator. That was the first day. Yes, she said. It was. The next 3 months were a kind of education I hadn't known I was missing, not professionally. Professionally, I had always been fluent. but in the grammar of being known by a specific person over time, in the texture of that, the way she started leaving the light on in the upstairs office when I was working late, which was the signal we'd developed without discussing it. The way she remembered that I didn't eat when I was in the middle of a problem and would set food near me in a way that didn't require me to stop or acknowledge. The way she had learned the specific frequency of my silence that meant I was afraid and the one that meant I was thinking, and never confused the two. I was learning her too. The grief first, her mother, who had built the company in its earliest form and died before it became what it was, who had apparently believed that control was love and had raised a daughter accordingly. Rhea had inherited the company and her mother's doctrine and had spent 9 years learning, slowly and at cost, where the doctrine was wrong. The coldness was the armor of a woman who had been taught that needing something was the same as losing it. She told me this on a Saturday in November, in her apartment, which had a kitchen she rarely used and a view that deserved better than rarely. We were cooking, she was attempting it, which was its own entertainment. She had an empire. She had, that morning, been defeated by a jar of pasta sauce. The lid, I explained. I understand the principle of the lid, she said. You're fighting it. I am applying appropriate force. You're arm wrestling a jar of tomato sauce. She set it down with exquisite dignity and said, I need you to open the jar. Ask me with your words. She looked at me. Please, she said, in a tone that contained its own private universe of irony, open the jar. I opened the jar. She was very still in the way that meant she was trying not to smile, and I had come to love that stillness, the contained amusement kind, the specific architecture of it, so different from the controlled guarding kind I'd first encountered in the lobby. That evening, after dinner, she told me about her mother. I told her about mine, who had left when B was 3 and I was 7, and who I had stopped waiting for somewhere around the second year of college, when I had found that the waiting was taking up space I needed for other things. She listened the way she did everything. When I finished, she said, You funded your sister's nursing school. Not a question. I had savings. You had nothing. I looked at the financial picture when we moved you to the new role. The loans filled in for what I didn't have, I said. She was quiet for a moment. She said, Why did you fund her instead of yourself? I thought about it. Because she was going to save people, I said. And I was going to protect systems. I can do that anywhere. She needed the specific credential. Rhea looked at me for a long time with the searching quality she deployed when she was deciding something. I have been, she said slowly, very wrong about what strength looks like. A pause. I was taught that it looks like not needing. You've spent your entire career demonstrating that it looks like deciding who gets your need and choosing carefully. I didn't have a response to that. I held her hand instead, which she allowed with the particular stillness of someone accepting something they have been hungry for without knowing the shape of the hunger. December arrived. It arrived with Sylvie Grange's license revocation appearing in the financial press under a 3-paragraph notice on a Wednesday morning, which I read at my kitchen table over coffee with a feeling that was not triumph and not satisfaction exactly, but the specific bodily relief of a debt being settled. Marcus had been let go from his new position at a competitor firm after a reference check that Tomos had provided thoroughly and accurately. Harlan Orr had resigned from the board citing personal reasons, which was a phrase that in context contained multitudes. The acquisition meeting had closed in October. Solaris had grown by 30%. Cassandra had been promoted to regional director, which she had come to tell me about in person, standing in my doorway with her habitual expression of professional composure and an undercurrent of something warmer that she had been too careful to show before. She said, I wanted you to know before the announcement. I said, "You deserved it 2 years ago." She said, "Yes. But I have it now." She paused in the doorway. "She chose well," she said. "It was not about the promotion." "She did," I said. Cassandra almost smiled. She left. Christmas week, Rhea took me to a cabin in the mountains that she owned and had never told anyone about, which she said was a place she went when she needed to exist outside the press epithet. No staff. No security rotation, just snow and a fire and a refrigerator she had had Tomas stock, which meant it was full of things I had mentioned in passing over 3 months, the specific yogurt brand I bought at the bodega on my block, the TB had sent me for my birthday, a jar of the pear jam I'd described once and then forgotten I'd described. I stood in front of the open refrigerator for a moment. She was behind me, reading something. "You remembered all of this," I said. "I remember things," she said, without looking up. All of it. The yogurt, the tea, the pear jam was one conversation. I mentioned it once, you mentioned it twice. Once in the car after the venue, and once when you were explaining your grandmother's kitchen to Tomas and you didn't know I was in the hallway. She turned a page. I listened. I closed the refrigerator. I looked at her profile, the sharp line of her jaw, the way the firelight made the cold of her a warmth, the way she held a book like something she trusted. I had a feeling in my chest that was too large to name and didn't need naming. It was the feeling of being known. The exact specific architecture of it. I had been building toward knowing what it felt like my whole life, without understanding that's what I was building toward. "Rhea," I said. She looked up. "I love you," I said. "I want you to know that I'm sure. I've been sure since the conference room, probably. I wanted to be certain it was mine, and not designation, and not gratitude. And I've been certain for 2 months, and I wanted to say it in a place where no one else would hear it first." She set the book down. She stood. She crossed to me in 4 steps and took my face in her hands and looked at me with the full current directness of someone who has stopped conserving and decided to spend everything. And she said, "I have been in love with you since you told me the server logs were in the incident folder and took your cactus into the elevator." She paused. I was not sure it was appropriate to say so at the time. That was the first day. "I am aware," she said, "that it was the first day." She kissed me. The fire went on behind us. Snow hit the windows. Her scent was everywhere, and mine was everywhere, and the room had that warm, specific quality of a place that is becoming a memory while you're still inside it. Later, we sat by the fire. She was reading again. I had Gerald. I'd brought him. Which had made her look at me with the controlled amusement stillness on the side table in a square of moonlight from the cabin window. Outside, the snow was coming down in a way that was not dramatic, just steady. The particular constancy of weather that doesn't need to perform. She reached over without looking up from her book and took my hand. I thought, I will find the light on. I thought it in the old way, the rehearsed way, the way I'd been saying it for 3 years as the shape your mouth makes when you're holding yourself together. And then I thought, I don't have to say it that way anymore. The light is already on. It was on before I got here. She keeps it on. 3 weeks later, on a Tuesday in January, in the kitchen of her apartment, she took a small box from the pocket of her coat before she'd even taken the coat off. She set it on the counter. She looked at it. She looked at me. "I practiced this," she said. "You practiced. 3 versions. You prepared materials." I did not prepare materials. I practiced internally. She was doing the contained amusement thing, but the current underneath was different, steadier, brighter, running deeper than I had ever tracked it. None of the versions were right, so I'm going to say it without them. She picked up the box. She didn't open it yet. She said, I have been running something cold since I was 22 years old, because I inherited a lesson that called it strength. You arrived with a cactus and a mug and 412 log entries, and you did not once pretend that what I called strength was strength, and you did not once flinch when it turned toward you. And you have been the first thing in 9 years that has made me believe that the door my mother locked could be unlocked. She paused. I want to be yours, specifically, legally, biologically, entirely. She opened the box. Ask me to stop, and I will. Inside the box was a ring, not the kind that announces itself, the kind that has been thought about. A thin band with a single dark stone, deep and warm, the color of the petrichor sky right after rain. Don't stop, I said. She put it on my finger. She stayed on one knee for an extra moment, which I don't think she'd planned, and I put my hand on her face and she turned her cheek into my palm with the particular weight of someone setting something down they've been holding for a long time. We got married in March. Not a production. A room with 15 people in it. Tomas, who sat in the second row with his arms crossed and his jaw working on some private emotion he was not going to name. Cassandra, who had brought Bia a corsage without being asked, which told me everything I needed to know about who she was when she wasn't being professional. Bea herself, who had worn a dress that made her look like she was the one getting married and cried through both sets of vows with the open-faced completeness of someone who has been waiting for her person to be happy and has not been sure it would happen, and 8 others I will not name, because the wedding is mine and Ria's, and the names belong to us. Ria's vows were 3 minutes long and contained 2 things she had practiced and one she hadn't. The one she hadn't was, I had a word for what you are to me before I had the feeling, and the word was wrong. The right word is home. My vows were shorter. I said, I notice you. I'll keep noticing you. That's the whole thing. She laughed, actually laughed, not the contained near miss, but the real version, which I had heard 4 times before this moment and was now going to hear for the rest of my life. Tomas made a small sound in the second row that was not a cough. The claiming came after, in the old words and the new ones, with her breath warm against my throat and the permission asked in the full grammar of it, not biology. Not command, but choice, spoken, witnessed, chosen. And when the bond snapped into place, it felt like a circuit completing, warm and specific and irrevocably mine. 6 months later, in September, I woke up in our apartment. We had one now, a merged territory that contained a kitchen Ria was still losing arguments with, and a windowsill where Gerald had been promoted to a larger pot and was thriving in a way that felt personal, to the sound of her on the phone in the next room. Early morning light. The particular gold of late summer coming through the linen curtains. Through the bond, I felt what she felt before I heard the words, satisfaction, the contained kind, the kind that comes after a long, careful project lands right. She came back into the bedroom. She sat on the edge of the bed. She said, Grange's appeal was denied. Sylvie Grange's regulatory case had been contested and contested again, slowly, expensively, through 2 appeal rounds. The denial was final. Her firm's license was permanently revoked. Her data broker relationship had generated a secondary investigation that was expected to conclude in spring. I said good. Ria said, yes. She paused. Are you satisfied? I thought about it honestly. I'm not interested in her, I said. I'm interested in us. She's just part of the accounting. I looked at the light coming through the curtains. The accounting is settled. Rhea lay back down next to me. She was still in her robe, which was a measure of how far we'd come. 9 months ago, she had dressed before I was awake, a habit of years. Now she lay next to me in the morning light, with her shoulder against mine and her scent warm and familiar and steady. "The accounting is settled," she agreed. Gerald was on the windowsill. The ring was on my finger. The light was on. B texted at 8, "Please tell me you're not working on a weekend." "I'm telling Mom." "Wait, I can't tell Mom. I'm telling Thomas." "Does Thomas have your number?" "He has everyone's number." "I love you." "Gerald, update, please." I sent her a photograph of Gerald in his large new pot with the morning light on him, looking robust and unbothered and thoroughly settled in his new life. She sent back, "That's my boy." And then, "Also, you look happy in the reflection. I can see your arm." I looked at the photograph. She was right. You could see the edge of my arm and the ring and the light coming in. I put the phone down. I lay in the morning quiet with the woman who had noticed me when I was standing in the wreckage of being overlooked. And I thought about the 48 hours that had started it, and about the 48 hours after that, and about all the hours since, and about how the thing I had said to myself for 3 years, "I'll find the light on," had been a small, brave, hopeful sentence that deserved a better ending than I'd ever been able to give it. It had one now. Some people spend their entire lives invisible, not because they are small, but because the rooms they've been given are the wrong size. The story doesn't start when you're finally seen. It starts when you stop apologizing for taking up space. The rest, the noticing, the staying, the choosing, follows, if you'll let it, in its own time, in its own shape, beginning with whatever you're willing to carry into the elevator. The end.